Cold War in international relations. The Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union from the end of World War II until the early 1990s, profoundly influenced international relations. Let's delve into the Cold War in international relations. The Cold War was a pivotal period in global history, characterized by intense political and military tension between the United States and its allies on one side and the Soviet Union and its allies on the other. Lasting from the mid-20th century until the early 1990s, this ideological struggle shaped international relations, leading to proxy wars, arms races, and the division of the world into two opposing blocs. Understanding the dynamics of the Cold War is crucial to comprehending modern geopolitics and the legacy as left on the international stage. Let's explore the complexities of this significant era in world history. Number 4. Origins and context. The origins of the Cold War can be traced back to the aftermath of World War II, a time when the major Allied powers, namely the United States and the Soviet Union, emerged victorious over Nazi Germany, but soon found themselves at odds regarding the future of Europe and the broader world order. The United States, championing democracy and free market capitalism, aimed to rebuild war-torn nations through initiatives like the Marshall Plan, fostering economic recovery and political stability under democratic governments. Conversely, the Soviet Union, under Joseph Stalin's leadership, sought to expand its influence by spreading communism, establishing pro-Soviet regimes in Eastern Europe, and consolidating its sphere of control. This fundamental ideological clash was further intensified by deep-seated mutual distrust. Each side perceived the other as a threat to its way of life and global ambitions. The contrasting visions for global governance, one advocating for open markets and individual freedoms, the other for centralized control and socialist principles, laid the groundwork for a prolonged period of geopolitical tension, military rivalry, and competing spheres of influence that came to be known as the Cold War. Number 3. Key elements and strategies. Arms race. Both superpowers engaged in an unprecedented arms race during the Cold War, feverishly developing and stockpiling nuclear weapons. This intense competition was epitomized by the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAGA. According to MAD, any full-scale nuclear exchange between the United States and the Soviet Union would result in the complete annihilation of both nations, rendering such a conflict unwinnable and catastrophic. The logic behind MAGA was that the sheer scale of destruction guaranteed by a nuclear war would serve as a powerful deterrent, preventing either side from initiating a first strike. This doctrine led to an ever-escalating accumulation of nuclear arsenals, with both superpowers striving to maintain a credible second strike capability to ensure that they could retaliate even after a devastating attack. The arms race also spurred advancements in missile technology, including the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs, further heightening the stakes. Proxy wars. Rather than engaging in direct military confrontation, the Cold War was frequently fought through proxy wars in various global regions. These conflicts, such as those in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan, enabled the United States and the Soviet Union to back opposing factions without resorting to head-to-head combat, thereby extending their influence and promoting their respective ideologies. In the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, the United States and its allies supported South Korea against the Soviet-backed North Korea, resulting in a brutal conflict that left the Korean peninsula divided to this day. Similarly, the Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, saw the U.S. fighting to prevent the spread of communism in Southeast Asia by supporting the South Vietnamese government against the North Vietnamese forces, who were backed by the Soviet Union and China. The war in Afghanistan, 1979 to 1989, marked another significant proxy conflict, where the Soviet Union invaded to support the communist Afghan government, while the United States, along with Pakistan and other allies, provided aid to the Mujahideen resistance fighters. These proxy wars allowed both superpowers to test their military strategies, deploy new technologies, and assert their dominance on the global stage without triggering a direct and potentially catastrophic nuclear war. Espionage and intelligence. Espionage was a pivotal element in the Cold War, with intelligence agencies such as the CIA in the United States and the KGB in the Soviet Union spearheading covert operations, extensive surveillance, and sophisticated intelligence-gathering efforts. These agencies engaged in a relentless game of cat and mouse, constantly striving to outmaneuver each other and gain critical insights into their rivals' strategic plans and technological advancements. High-profile incidents highlighted the intense and often dangerous nature of this clandestine warfare. One notable example is the U-2 spy plane incident in 1960, when an American reconnaissance aircraft was shot down over Soviet territory, leading to the capture of its pilot, Francis Gary Powers, and a major diplomatic crisis. Another significant episode involved Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, American citizens who were convicted and executed in 1953 for allegedly passing atomic secrets to the Soviets. These cases, among others, underscored the pervasive atmosphere of suspicion and the high stakes of espionage during the Cold War, as both superpowers sought to gain an upper hand through secretive and often perilous means. Number 2. Major crisis and detente. Berlin blockade, 1948 to 1949. One of the first major crises of the Cold War was the Soviet blockade of Berlin in 1948 to 1949, which aimed to force the Western Allies out of the city by cutting off all land and rail access to West Berlin. In response, the United States, along with its British and French allies, initiated the Berlin Airlift, a monumental effort to supply the city entirely by air. For almost a year, cargo planes flew around the clock, delivering food, fuel, and other essential supplies to the isolated residents of West Berlin. This operation not only provided a lifeline to the beleaguered city, but also showcased American resolve and technological prowess. The successful airlift undermined Soviet attempts to exert control over Berlin and solidified the division of the city, eventually leading to the establishment of two separate German states. The Berlin Airlift was a significant early victory for the West in the Cold War, demonstrating the United States' commitment to defending democracy and countering Soviet aggression. Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis, perhaps the closest the world came to nuclear war, occurred in October 1962 and involved the Soviet placement of nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the U.S. coast. This act was perceived as a direct threat to American national security and led to a tense 13-day standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. President John F. Kennedy responded by establishing a naval blockade around Cuba, termed a quarantine, to prevent further Soviet shipments of military equipment. The world watched in apprehension as Soviet ships approached the blockade line, risking a potential military confrontation. Behind the scenes, intense diplomatic negotiations took place between Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. The crisis was eventually diffused when Khrushchev agreed to withdraw the missiles from Cuba in exchange for a U.S. public declaration and agreement not to invade Cuba. Additionally, unbeknownst to the public at the time, the U.S. secretly agreed to remove its Jupiter missiles from Turkey, which were capable of striking the Soviet Union. This resolution not only averted a nuclear catastrophe, but also led to the establishment of a direct communication link between Washington and Moscow, known as the Hotline, to facilitate direct and swift communication in future crises. Detente, 1970s. The period of eased tensions and improved relations during the Cold War, known as detente, was marked by significant efforts to reduce the risk of conflict and promote cooperation between the superpowers. Central to this era were the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, which resulted in agreements like SALT-I in 1972 and SALT-TI in 1979. These treaties aimed to curtail the arms race by capping the number of strategic ballistic missile launchers and limiting the deployment of missile defense systems, thereby fostering a sense of strategic stability. Alongside SALT, the Helsinki Accords of 1975 played a crucial role in detente. Signed by 35 nations, including the U.S. and the Soviet Union, the Accords were part of the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, CSCE, and covered a wide range of issues, from security and human rights to economic and scientific cooperation. The Helsinki Accords helped to establish a framework for ongoing dialogue and collaboration, emphasizing respect for sovereign borders and the peaceful settlement of disputes. This period of detente demonstrated that even amidst ideological rivalry, the superpowers could find common ground and take concrete steps towards reducing the likelihood of nuclear confrontation and fostering a more stable international environment. Number 1. Legacy and impact. The Cold War's profound impact on international relations reshaped the geopolitical landscape for decades, leading to the formation of enduring alliances, such as NATO, which provided collective security against perceived Soviet aggression. This period of intense rivalry influenced numerous global conflicts and political developments, as both superpowers supported opposing factions in regions like Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan, thus extending their ideological battle by proxy. The arms race between the US and the Soviet Union resulted in significant nuclear proliferation, creating a legacy that continues to challenge global security and necessitates ongoing disarmament efforts. The ideological struggle between communism and capitalism not only polarized nations during the Cold War, but also left a lasting imprint on political discourse and policies worldwide, influencing economic systems, governance structures, and international relations long after the Cold War's official end in 1991. Thanks for watching. Subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon.